Hi everyone, this is Joanna Schneider and this is my recording for my Level 4 project for EDIT 6150. This is our technology integration project. It's the culmination of 3 other projects that we've done throughout the semester. So throughout my other projects, my main focus has been on gaming. Particularly on what are called commercial off-the-shelf games, which are games that are not designed to be educational. I think these are really important because they're going to be a lot more accessible to a variety of subject areas that might not have educational games designed for them, and because I think one of the big reasons to include games in the classroom is because they engage students, and students have preconceived notions about what educational games are and about what commercial games are, and I think you are going to, especially with older kids, always get a better response from a commercial off-the-shelf game. So I focused my Level 3 project on a specific commercial off-the-shelf game called Oxygen Not Included, which I still think has incredible potential for education, but it's a relatively new game and I couldn't really find a lot of resources and I wasn't sure exactly what direction I wanted to go on my own, so I switched gears a little to a game called Kerbal Space Program for my Level 4 project. So Kerbal Space Program this is a quote from the game's website, is a game where you build spacecraft, fly them, and then help Kerbals to fulfill the ultimate mission of conquering space. So Kerbals are these little people that you have, and you are running their space program. You are running NASA for these little aliens. And if you're playing like in the campaign mode, you have to start from the ground up, and I'll show you a little bit of what this looks like. You start from the ground up, you have to learn to build your rockets, you have to learn to fly your rockets. There's a lot of good physics in there, and as a physics teacher, that's very appealing to me. It's a little overwhelming, which is why I was glad I found some resources that were made by someone else that I could kind of modify for my purposes. There's actually, much like Minecraft has released Minecraft EDU, there's actually an entire version of Kerbal Space Program that's Kerbal EDU, and it has lesson plans that go along with it, but that felt way too cheap. And it's a separate version of the game that you have to pay for. It's much cheaper than the normal version of the game, but I own the normal version of the game, so I decided I would stick with that. The lesson is actually specifically designed so that all you need is the demo, so you wouldn't even have to purchase it for all your students, although I like to think that after playing around with it, some of them would go home and purchase the game for themselves and continue using it. This last bullet point I have on my slide is from my Level 3 project, and it's a quote from a study that was done earlier this year about how commercial off-the-shelf games can, in fact, be successfully used in the classroom. They can be relevant learning tools that educators, researchers, and instructional designers may employ towards traditional learning objectives. Because I think everybody it feels pretty solid about the fact that games designed to be educational are successful, but some people may need a little more convincing that games that were designed to be fun and make money can be successful educationally. So my lesson kind of consists of 4 parts, and I just wanted to list them here, and then I'll show you each of them. First, this would be in a upper high school level class, physics class, so either like an 11th or 12th grade honors level class or an AP level class. And this would be the part where you're going to talk about Newton's laws of universal gravitation. At this point, you would have already covered circular motion. And this lesson starts out very traditionally with a PowerPoint that the teacher would go through, notes the students would take. This lesson was originally designed for block scheduling, so it would have to be changed a little for shorter class periods. After the PowerPoint is when you would actually pull up the game, show the students as a class, have it up on the board, show the students a little bit about the game, how it works. there's a save file that I created that has, instead of having to go through the process of learning to make the rockets, learning how fast they need to go to getting into orbit, there's a specific save file the teacher would have set up that would already have 3 objects in 3 different orbits, which I'll show you in a second. And so you would look at that as a class, and then you would actually use data taken from the game to confirm some of the formulas that were in the PowerPoint to show that those formulas are valid. That would be on a block scheduling, that would all be 1 day. If you were on a non-block schedule, that would be at least 2 days, maybe more like 3. Then there is a lab worksheet that has students individually play around with that same save file that has the orbits already set up, but it asks them to make predictions about how it's going to change the orbit to change different things like velocity and radius, and they actually get to fly the little spaceships around and do the lesson, which I'll show you in a second. Then the assessment piece would be a quiz. This wouldn't necessarily have to count as a quiz grade. I'm calling it a quiz, but it's just an assessment that has them use a couple of the equations from the PowerPoint and has them apply a little bit of the knowledge that came from this lab worksheet just to make sure that they're really getting what you're talking about. All right, so let me show you the actual game. So this is Kerbal Space Program. So this is the launch screen. So if you go to Start Game, if we told it we wanted to start a new game, we would actually have multiple options where you can choose whether you want it to be sandbox mode, where everything's already unlocked, science mode, where you have to research things before you can use them, and career, where you actually have to earn the money to do the science to research things. So it's kind of progressively how difficult you want it to be. We're actually going to be doing a sandbox mode, but we're not even going to be starting a new game. So perhaps the most difficult part of setting up for this lesson is that you need to have a save file that already has these 3 orbits. Now, I actually did the hard part of creating that save file, and I will have that posted on my portfolio site. But you have to figure out how to put that save file in the correct place, which I am also going to have a document on my portfolio site explaining how to do that. But I have the game installed through Steam, which is a platform for playing video games, and where Steam saves video game files is going to be different where if you just download the demo or something from their website where it saves files. So the instructor will need to do a little bit of research ahead of time and make sure that both they and the students are going to have access to this save file. So if we go to Resume Saved, it's called Lesson File. So if you've done the instructions that I will put on the portfolio correctly, you will have this file here. You will load it. Loading. I like the loading symbol, has orbits. So this is Kerbal Space Program. Again, if we were playing more of it, you have to build your things here. You have to research them here. You actually have to recruit astronauts to fly your missions. You launch them from here, but we already have things in orbit. So we're going to go to our tracking station and see what we've got. So again, I have 3 things in orbit. There are 3 very different orbits. One is a low Earth orbit, although their planet is actually called Kerbal. So a low Kerbal orbit. Then this one is a high Kerbal orbit, so it's orbiting significantly further out from the planet. And then Kerbal, the planet Kerbal, has a moon called the Mun. And the last one is actually, I have a satellite that's in a low Mun orbit, so it's orbiting the moon of this planet. If we click on a specific one, we can tell it that we want to fly, which is something they have to do in the lab. And then it will actually let us control, and this is where it is more of a video game, we actually can control how to fly this. The lab worksheet goes over instructions for how to move things around. It's not super intuitive, so you would definitely need to give students long enough to figure out how to move things, which is WSAD, Shift and Alt, control your throttle. I've screwed things up so entirely that we're now just spinning randomly. We can, if we hit M, it'll show us our orbital path. Clicking on that allows you to, that's not what I want. Yeah, we can add maneuvers, which tells the ship to do specific things. So that's kind of a general overview of the game. I don't know, I clicked on the wrong one, I think. Let's see. It can be sometimes kind of difficult to go back. Because the game's not designed as an educational game, it is not always super intuitive or user-friendly, so that's something to keep in mind. That's why I think it's so important that day one of this lesson has you show the kids how to use it as a group. And if you haven't ever played it before, which I owned it but actually hadn't ever played it before I did this lesson, you really need to spend some time getting familiar with it. Which I would need to spend some more time before I embarrassed myself in front of students. If you choose one, so this is a manned, this is just kind of an Easter egg that I think is really cute. If you choose a manned capsule and you click on fly, so there's actually, I have Jebediah Kerman, and he just looks so happy that he's flying this spaceship, and I just think that's really cute because I'm easily amused. So let me show you the resources that I've put together. I just realized that I am already over the time limit, so I'm going to give you a really brief look at these. They will be uploaded with my lesson on my portfolio site if you want to look at them in more detail or use this lesson yourself. This is my PowerPoint. Oh, and this will be credited on my portfolio page as well, but I actually got this lesson and adapted it from a Reddit user who posted it with the intention of letting other teachers use it, which I think is awesome. He created this PowerPoint and the lab sheet I'm going to show, and I just changed them a little, and then he talked about what you needed to set up in the save file, and I created that myself. So kind of the big things in this PowerPoint that I've mentioned are that you would actually end up using a few of these formulas, this one. So for any given planet, the velocity of something in orbit is going to be equal to the square root of the gravitational constant times the mass of the planet over the radius of your orbit. So one of the calculations I would have the students do would be it gives you the orbital velocity, and we know the radius, so we could actually find the masses of Kerbal and of the Mun using this formula. And then using this formula, we could find how long it takes them to orbit, their period, how long a year is, and you can actually confirm both of those numbers within the game. Then the last thing I'm going to show really quickly is the lab worksheet that I was talking about. It does a pretty good job of giving some visuals and explaining to the students how to fly their ship around. And then it asks them things like, what do you think will happen if you fly your craft with the throttle up, pointing towards the prograde indicator? What effect do you think will have on your orbit? And then you actually do it, and they have to tell whether or not that meets their expectations. Same is true down here. Then this last part, the original poster who created this had this as extra credit. I kind of thought that it should be required, but that would be totally up to the instructor. This has you do some very specific things, like change the low Kerbal orbit to an elliptical orbit and get the teacher to sign off. I'm going to run out of time on Screencast-O-Matic, which means I am super out of time, you guys. Thanks for listening to my presentation.